Welcome back to another episode of the Dope Stroke podcast. Finally, Daryl has stepped up and got ourselves a decent guest. We've got Dean Burmester from the LIV Tour joining us today. He's actually part of Stinger GC. Is that how the connection came about, McD? Because I know you've got a big connection with Stingers.
You're talking about the Sydney Stinger.
The Sydney Stinger, is it the same team? Yeah. Are we on the same team here?
Mate, let's not go down that route of the conversation here, because that's all starts to get a little bit X-rated, shall we? So let's just move on to the main man and our main guest for today's episode, the one and only Dean Burmester. Thanks for coming on the show today, Dino, and much appreciated for your time. How you doing?
All good, boys. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Obviously, sunny Spain. That's where I'm sitting right now. So beautiful, man. Just excited.
Burmy, what you're going to notice about these podcasts is we've got a lot of side episodes that we should have for Daryl's life, and he has a deep connection with, like I say, a team that's the same name as your team. But mate, how did all this come about? I was looking on before we got on. Obviously, you and I had slightly different paths on tour. Fantastic development through the Sunshine Tour. Some of the names back in the early 2000s you beat on that tour, by the way, were absolute legends of the Sunshine Tour. Then progressed on to the European Tour through a co-sanctioned event. Let's start there and talk a little bit about the opportunity that South Africa was getting through co-sanctioned events with the European, now DP World Tour, that sort of set you on your way.
Yeah, in those days we were really lucky. You know, obviously I started really young, 20 years old in the Sunshine Tour, got through all of that, like you say, played well on the Sunshine Tour at various levels, right from the bottom all the way through, and then kind of broke through at the Tshwane Open at a co-sanction event. And in those days, I think we had 5 co-sanction events a year in South Africa, and then I think Mauritius on top of that. So a lot of guys benefited from that kind of route and winning events and getting over there, and maybe even finishing second, getting enough points up and stuff like that. So I was fortunate enough to be one of those guys. I think Hoy Campillo was leading going into that final day. I was 2 or 3 strokes back and shot 29 on the front 9, and that was kind of the end of it. Nobody did anything else, and I was leading by 6 or 7 with 2 holes to go, and it was just kind of cruising. So it was a special day for me. It was a long kind of hard road. I played Challenge Tour, been to 2 Q schools at that stage to try and get into Europe and not got through. Almost played a full season on Challenge Tour and kind of got close, but didn't do enough to get a card. And then in that very next, early in the year, finished 4th at the SA Open. When Rory played, and then that got me into Abu Dhabi, finished 7th in Abu Dhabi, and then I finished, I think, 20th in Qatar, and I kind of almost had enough points already through the season to keep my card, and then went home for like a 2-3 week break, and then boom, won first week out again in Tshwane. So that changed my life drastically, got me kind of into Europe and competing against a whole different kind of field day in, day out.
I think with pro golf, what people don't understand is how hard it is to get on the show properly. We've touched on it a little bit on the Dope Stroke podcast, talking about getting a card within a card. You can get on the fringes, but then you need the right category. You mentioned 5 co-sanctioned events. Then obviously you had to take a long time getting through Challenge Tour. A time on Challenge Tour, not a long time. Yeah. In all seriousness, this was a quick rise to fame. But how did you keep preparing for those individual events when those moments came? Because even if your game is off, if there's a tournament where you can win and get through and promoted, you got to take it. So how did you take those chances as time progressed?
Yeah, it was, I think the Sunshine Tour taught me a lot about that, because when the co-sanction events came around year in, year out, they were so big and so point and money heavy for the Sunshine Tour guys, when it came not only for order of merit and points and where you finish in the season and those kinds of things, but just financially it was really big for everybody, because that would set you up, financially free for the next year, and then you could go and play a little freer. You didn't have to worry about finances and stuff like that. So that set me up for when I got to Europe, and then you had key moments and you had chances where you needed to play well, when the Rolex series did come around and those things. And then it was almost like another bigger step of the same thing that I'd been through, if that made sense. So every time I got into a Rolex series event, I kind of treated it, with that kind of sense in mind, with where I'd been. So I had a little bit of experience in that. And that's just kind of how you do it. When you get in those moments, if you have a chance, the only way you take the chances is by, screwing and messing up a whole bunch of chances before that. Because, if you're not going to lose and learn out of losing, you're never going to win. and any winner will tell you that he's a really good loser. That's basically what a winner is.
That's good. Talking about sticking on that point, actually, you obviously shot a course record at 64 last week to qualify for the Open Championship. Like, that's a hell of a score line. Like, how do you, when you know that you're 5, 6, 7 under and you got many holes to go still, how do you just keep on going? Like, some people reach a point where they go, I'm 3 or 4 under and they start protecting the scorecard. It's almost like you get more aggressive. Like, how do you approach it when you know you're going low that particular day?
I think it's also kind of easy because you're playing well. In a way, in the morning round, I shot 2 under in pretty benign, calm conditions, and I was really frustrated with myself and wasn't kind of getting the most out of my game. And then I had a coronation chicken sandwich and a Diet Coke, and then went back on the range, and it was blowing it was blowing 30. And I had a quick 20-minute warm up, went onto the first tee, striped it straight down the middle, and I was like, okay, that felt good. And then striped it down the middle on the next, and that felt great. And then the momentum kind of just kept building. And because the guys went so low in the morning, I kind of never looked at the leaderboard. I knew that quite a few guys are going to come back. But I just felt the need that I needed to just keep pushing. And I was lucky. Ali, my manager, was on the bag. So, the back 18, I was expecting him to kind of fade away, but he didn't. He kept me going. He kept saying, come on, we need one more, one more, and we're going to be good. Let's keep going. Let's keep pushing. So he kind of got me into that frame of mind as well, which is, a lot of things that guys don't see about caddies in general anyway. The best caddies are the ones that get the most out of a mediocre round. They help their player get the most out of a mediocre round. And that's kind of what happened in the morning. And then to be able to carry that and have a second opportunity at it, kind of a second bite at the cherry, in the afternoon was cool. And to be able to pull it off like that and course record, I looked down the last to really break the course record, and to have that opportunity in those kind of conditions is great for me leading into the Open, because now I'm, bring on Northern Ireland, bring on the weather, it'll be good.
Yeah, so sorry, Roger, one sec. You're comfortable in on links golf courses with the type of game that you play, obviously shooting a score like that around that track, and you've already alluded to the fact that you're going into Port Russia with quite a high level of confidence here. Is links golf a format that you enjoy? What are the challenges as someone like you? It's a ball a long way. Like, how do you manage that on a links course?
So I learned a lot coming over, playing Daniel links, numerous times. First few times I hated it. I was terrible at it, South African, just hit it high, hit it far, and then the more I played it, the more I got to enjoy the little quirks and the small things that come with links golf, about where you move your ball, where you place it. Sometimes it's better to whack a driver 20 yards into the rough to take all the bunkers out of play. That guarantees you get it on the green, rather than trying to, hit a 2-iron down the fairway, because if it does run into a bunker, you're dead. So, you kind of manage your way around links golf, and that's what makes it special. It's so unique and so different to every other golf course we would ever play. But for me, being long, it actually bodes well for me, because whenever I go to an Open, I never carry a 3-wood. I've always got a driver, 1-iron, 2-iron, and that's how I structure my bag at the top of the bag. So if it's like a baked out St Andrews, the 150th Open, or Royal St George's where it was baked out, my 1-iron's going 350 yards because it just doesn't stop running. So that's a neat club to have in the bag, and that kind of makes it easier for me. But then in Troon last year, where I did quite well, it wasn't as baked out, and then we had really bad weather, where the 1-iron also comes into play, because it's good to know that you've got something you can just lean on and hit low and let it go. My best finishes in majors have all come in at the Opens, and I'm hoping I can do one better, kind of get an even better finish and finish high up there, or at least be in contention for a long period of time.
There's a lot to unpack here. How many coronation chicken sandwiches are you going to have in the bag?
I'm going to have one every 9 holes, I think. Sounds like,
And then I think if someone on this podcast listening has got to be taglining that, hit it low and let it go. You've been hanging out with the Stinger PR team too much, haven't you?
Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah, I know. It is what it is. I suppose it comes with the territory.
So let's just touch on that 1-iron for a minute here. Do you have the same 1-iron from Troon? Because Troon, by the way, is as tight as a mouse's ear.
Yeah.
And it was running pretty fast there. Obviously, I saw the British Grand Prix yesterday, and there's going to be a bit of rain, I assume, in those parts. Port Rush, a bit further north. Cracking golf course. 1-iron's a good shout. Do you change that coming into it, or are you running the same 1-iron from last year?
No, I'm running the same one I have from last year. So I don't use it that often. So I will run the same one basically. They don't break, and I wouldn't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
Exactly. And then how do you change wedge bounce and stuff for courses like that? Or do you stick with what you use on a regular season?
so when you generally, if it's baked out, I'll go with something really low. I might even grind a bit off towards the heel, just to kind of make sure that the you don't get any dig, like any major bounce when you open it up, and any dig when you're hitting full shots. I kind of like to see low bounce anyway. So for me, if I shave it off and I chip with an open face, it's a lot easier if it's baked out and it's firm. So to shave a lot off the heel, and kind of, I just feel like I can chip a little better basically and get through the turf a bit better. So yeah, for me, we'll have to wait and see what Portrush is like. If they've had a lot of rain and the weather is going to be wet and stuff, I'll probably kind of leave just a normal wedge, kind of a wedge balance that I would have in general in the bag.
Question from me here then, Burmy, is I'm thinking about the fact that you had to qualify for the Open Championship in the first place, which seems almost a little bit unnatural for a player of your standard and expertise. Like, obviously, I know that you're a LIV golfer. You've been playing on LIV for some time. How do you think this is likely to play out over the next few years, given the fact that the majors are so heavily weighted towards the world ranking points? And what your view on those world ranking points might be, because players like yourself has to qualify. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think it's a big and obviously a hot topic, and it has been for quite some time. My opinion is, golf is a big game. We've now got quite a lot of competitors and quite a lot of big tours all over the world that are providing jobs for a lot of guys. This is one of them. PGA Tour is another one. And the world ranking, where that sits in that, with the major championships being so heavily weighted, it kind of, you're not going to get the best field every time. The fields are going to kind of thin out. You're going to get great players going out of fields. Guys, exemptions are going to run out. Guys are not going to, guys like your Brooks, your DJs, those guys, eventually their exemptions run out. I know Phil's is running out. Would you want Phil to be in your tournament? I think most guys would want Phil to play. And then you've got great talented young players. David Pooge has been playing some exceptional golf. Lucas Herbert's another guy who's been playing amazing. Who didn't play in the PGA, who I felt was a little hard done by to not get into that tournament. So there's kind of both sides to the story, and it makes it difficult. But my opinion is, hopefully we can get something sorted out world ranking wise or invite wise. At least we've got a spot. We did get a spot into the PGA. We did get a spot into the US Open. We did get a spot into the British Open. So I think that bodes well for it opening up. And that's a great start for us. And I think if we can move on forward from that, it is young. LIV is still young. It's only, going on 4 years old. So it's still new and fresh, and we'll have to wait and see. Unfortunately, as a player, I've got to chase a little white ball around and put it in a hole, and other people are in power of making those decisions. So I'll have to wait and see what they decide, and that kind of puts everybody's fate in their hands.
I think it's funny, though, with or without LIV Golf, the world rankings has been a bit of a bone of contention for a while. Just thinking prior to LIV Golf's formation, really, and when they made those changes to the world rankings, which heavily affected the players playing on what we like to call the European Tour, not the DP World Tour. We call it the European Tour here. And it's funny now how my perception of the world rankings is definitely evolving and definitely changing, to the point where I'm not even sure how relevant the world ranking points are anymore. And I start to then think about, if you're playing LIV events and you're in the top whatever in the order of merit and you're getting starts into the majors, surely that has to be the route in for the long term, not just for the short term. Therefore, what is the point of having world ranking points? It's just my general view. It's just a comment from my standpoint. But do you not think, or as a question to you, and staying on the subject of world ranking points, the challenges for LIV Golf, challenges for DP World players as well, or European Tour players, like everything seems to be gearing up for PGA Tour all the time when it comes to world ranking points. Do you think that that's fair when we're trying to grow the game internationally? And is there any sort of insight that you have related to those world rankings that, might provide some balance for the people that listen to this podcast?
Yeah, I think there's no secret that it is definitely heavily weighted towards the PGA Tour. I think you go back 5-10 years ago, I think there was an imbalance to the point where there were a lot of events in Europe. There were a lot of events on the Sunshine Tour. I got to, when I had a really good season. I'm talking like 10 years ago, 2015, 2014, 2015. You know, I finished second in the Challenge Tour event and I won 5 times on the Sunshine Tour in a season. And I got all the way to 82nd in the world by doing that. So I wasn't playing on a major tour and I was 82nd in the world. So it felt like it was spewed the other way. And then they made all these changes. And then now it's gone the total wrong way. I feel there's also an element to the DP World or European Tour now. Every year they've got these exciting young players coming through and they're losing them to the PGA Tour. So the PGA Tour's rankings are getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And that leaves nothing for anybody else but breadcrumbs. And that's my viewpoint on it. I feel the European Tour, DP World Tour is an amazing place to play golf. I honed my craft there for 10 to 12 years, and I loved it. And for me to see their fields weakening in that way, and certainly their world ranking weakening, until Rory, Shane, and everybody come back, Rosie and everyone comes back and plays and supports the tour, which is great of them to do. I feel is unfair. I think there's too much talent on that tour, and there's too many guys that are not getting the opportunity that they should be getting in major championships to prove themselves, and then go on to the PGA Tour if needs be. I think there's different ways and views on it, different ways to look at it, and different views on it. But yeah, I feel it is irrelevant in a way. I feel the world ranking is irrelevant because they're guys out there. A guy like Jordan Smith who's finished top 30 on the money list, I don't know, for the last 4 or 5 years in DP World Tour, but hasn't quite got a nod onto PGA Tour. He's featured in majors before. He's a talented player. We all know how good he is. And there's a guy I feel who's not really benefiting. He's kind of hanging between 100, 140, 100 or 200. He's just hanging there because there's not enough points. So even if he does play well, there's not enough points for him to grab unless he wins a Wentworth or something like that. So I don't know. I feel it's irrelevant to the point where everybody else that I know talks about all the other, data golf rankings and whatever other rankings. They look at those rankings and they feel like that's a fairer reflection on who's currently playing well. And I think with everything that's going on with sports betting and everything, with golf, that's what people are looking at. They're looking at those kind of stats going into majors and going into tournaments. They're not looking at the world ranking and thinking, well, because these guys are playing elevated events where there's no cut and there's only 60 of them, a guy who starts at 10th plays every one of those events for the next 4 years because he's multiple winner on the PGA Tour. He's only falling out of the top 50 in 3 years. He's only falling out of the top 50 in the world in 3 years, unless he finishes dead last in every event. So there is definitely a version of this where they can bring it close together and get it right, but it isn't there right now, basically.
But sport, as always, gives a platform, right? You've gone out. We've already covered it. You've played Sunshine Tour. You've gone and won on that tour. Then you've gone even Corn Ferry in parts of it. Then you've taken yourself off to go and qualify for the Open Championship, shooting course record, tying 64. You didn't need to do any of that. So we can sit here and talk about players that, oh, well, he should be here, he should be there. The flip side of the coin is you're pushing the envelope for your own game. And I think that you probably need to give yourself a bit of credit for that, in all fairness. I mean, there's still opportunities out there. So, yes, I think where I'm going with this is, how do players qualify for LIV effectively? Is there now a qualification process in place, or is it can only get picked by a captain like you did?
I think so. There is the promotions event, and there is a way in, and I think they're ironing it out. I think that from LIV's side, they're trying to measure out the Asian Tour and the International Series events, which they're providing a pathway in through that. The winner of that order merit gets a spot on LIV, and then also this promotion relegation, and how they balance it all out. So I think it's still a process and it's a work in progress. But I think they're getting to something that's going to be more consistent and be more of like a Q school effectively. I think there'll be multiple options to get onto LIV, and I think that's a good way to do it. I think there should be more than one chance. A guy who's played well in $2 million events throughout the season should get a chance to come and prove himself against this kind of field. And then also another guy who goes to a Q school should have a chance, if he wins the Q school or the top 3 or whatever they decide, should. And guys on LIV who have a really bad season should go back and try and play that promotion relegation event again. And I feel that's a fair reflection of balancing out everything. And then you'll on LIV side, they'll also get a strong field, year in, year out. If they do that, if they leave it up to captain's picks, I feel it becomes effectively a boys' club in a way, and I don't think that is growing the game of golf, in my opinion.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about when you're playing well and you just let it go. When you look at some of these victories you've had, it would be wrong of us not to mention Sergio Garcia, the victory that you had against him on the LIV, and also some of the names you've come up against and the finishes you've had on that tour and previous tours. How does each tournament result or victory or progress differ to the next? Or is it a case of when you're playing well, you could be playing anybody? Because Tiger Woods, I know, was a childhood icon of yours. You watched him, you respected him, liked him. That's a big deal when you take him down in a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I remember the day when I got, I think top 100 in the world, and he fell out top 100 in the world. I remember taking a screenshot or a photo on my phone of the world rankings on my iPad and sending it to my dad and my crew and saying, look, I've just taken over Tiger Woods in the world ranking for the first time. And it was like a thing, I mean, because when we grew up, no one was taking over Tiger Woods. He was number one. He was always number one. So no one was ever, VJ did it, Duval did it, but nobody really took him off the top of the pedestal. But yeah, if I'm playing well and you're in that kind of frame of mind and you're in the flow, I back myself against anybody. I mean, last year I played the second to last group on Saturday with Scotty Scheffler, the world number one, at the Open at Troon, and we had really bad weather, and I kind of hung with him until the last 3-4 holes, which was great. He obviously went on to have a really good finish. I finished 15th or whatever it was, and it was a good learning experience for me because I'm playing with the world's best player right now who I've watched, who's so consistent. And I got to watch him for 5.5 hours or 5 hours in that weather. And I watched him hardly miss a shot and his demeanor not change. But in the same time, it's just such a simple thing that he's doing. Like what he's doing in the game of golf and for his game and what he does day in, day out it's so simple. And that just means that I can do that. And if I know I can do that, then I know I can beat him because every dog has his day. It is sport after all. You got these great stories, and if I get to write one of those stories and it means taking down Tiger or Scotty Scheffler or that bumblebee, then it'll be amazing.
How do players keep that demeanor all the time, though? I mean, Garcia was the name I meant to say earlier. Obviously, filled it with Tiger, and you covered us great there. But how do players keep the demeanor and the level playing field emotionally all the time? You said Scotty was fantastic at it. That's hard for a lot of us to do as lesser golfers.
Oh yeah, it's hard for me to do. I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say I'm emotional. I've thrown many a club. I might not have broken a ton, but I've thrown plenty clubs and I've said a lot of really, really bad words on air. And but it's just that frustration. For me, I got to get it out. Other guys, they can keep it in. Honestly, humanly, I don't know how they do it, but my personality is it's got to come out. But what I've learned to do and what I've learned from a lot of other guys who have similar kind of temperaments that I do is just to get over it. So get it out, but then get over it. Don't carry it. And I think that's the secret. I think that's what guys don't see is that, Garcia, we've all watched him kick his shoes down the fairway, whack bunkers 100 times. I mean, he gets it out and he gets on with the job because the next shot's, the next shot's important. And you could chip it in, but if you're in the wrong frame of mind and you're moaning and going on about it and thinking about what's happened 3 holes ago, you're never going to chip that shot in because you're not really into that acute. I've got to pitch right on that pitch mark, or you don't visually see what you would see when when everything comes easy to you and you're playing great. And that's what makes the great players just a little bit better than the guys who aren't quite there.
Yeah. One more, Daryl, because I got to ask it. It's the right time, and then I'll let me, Daryl. I like to talk a lot on these podcasts, but I've been meaning to get this question out from the start.
47%.
Your old man was a pro athlete. I saw that when I was looking at some stuff on here, and you mentioned him when you mentioned Tiger Woods and the rankings. How much has he impacted your journey? And I know that your families are very, like your mother's golfer and things like that. How much has a family around you helped shape how far you could actually go and are going?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think if it wasn't for the 4 of us, my brother included, so we were a super competitive family. Like we always grew up competitive, even between each other. My dad, obviously a professional cricketer, played the World Cup, took the first ever Test wicket for Zimbabwe, did so many amazing things for his country and his sport. But the way he led us as a family, never. He always used to describe this thing to us. Basically, the only way I can think about it is he used to say I would run into the nets and practice and bowl until the blood came running out of my shoes. And he said, that's what we're about. He says, that's what we're about as a family. We're going to go and we're going to grind it out. He always said, I wasn't the most talented guy on our team, but I was sure as hell was going to play for the team and I was going to do my job for the team. And that's what he spoke about. But then I inherited, golf talent from my mom. And I was able to apply what my dad did with work ethic and all these things and his competitive nature and, kind of the grind to having this talent that, my mom obviously was blessed with and she was really good at. And then having that and then having a brother 4 years younger than me that always wanted to beat me at everything I did, at every single, garden cricket, hitting balls over the house, flipping, fishing, it could have been anything. Like the competitive nature between the two of us it was pretty intense to the extent of fighting on a daily basis. And so having that kind of groomed me to kind of, when I got to 18 years old, to know, my parents asked me, so what do you want to do? When I was 17, I was still playing cricket, whatever, but I knew I wasn't good enough for cricket, and I told my parents, I want to try the golf thing. I'd never really invested in hitting balls on the range more than 15 minutes, or I'd putted a lot on the putting green with my mates or whatever, but I'd never really invested in the game. And then from there to kind of kick on and take all my work ethic that I'd been putting into cricket, into golf, to 2.5 years later, turning professional, playing on the Sunshine Tour at 20, to going, so if I didn't have all of those attributes and all of those things in my childhood growing up and, being able to play all those different sports and getting a taste of everything and, applying all of that to golf, I don't think I'd be where I am today for sure.
How much
So
do you
thinking
think,
about
Daryl, I'm in now.
bloody
I'm
hell.
asking
Hang
my
on, no,
questions now.
try. I want to know how many clubs you threw yesterday, Trotty, because that's your bet. If you're world number one at something, it'd be how many clubs you broke and threw yesterday.
I didn't throw any yesterday. I actually played golf yesterday. Played all right. No, I didn't throw one. Nearly threw a 3-wood on 17, but
Anyway.
I didn't. I'll let you ask the next
I'll
question.
ask you a question. No, you ask it now if you're going to be moody about it, 47%.
All I was going to say is the NCAAs were in town here the other day, San Diego, Carlsbad, and you see all these kids come through for the golf. Completely different journey to that. Like a groomed journey into US college and living here in the States. The amount of money that is spent on junior golf. There's the Junior Worlds coming to the golf course I play at, and it's Junior Worlds for under 11-year-olds.
Yeah.
I was blown away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They're charging 2.5 times the price for a green reading heat map book. I don't want to say the brand, but 2.5 times the price on what is for the members for the heat. I don't know if you've ever seen these heat maps, Daryl. You've obviously seen them on tour. They're pretty different. You got to be aim pointing. You got to know the degree. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to feel this out. And where's the fall line? And I'm old school, I guess now. But it's like you just look at where it's going, and it would be great because I think you speak so well to get your take. Here's a guy who's just gone and ground it out, sporting background, competitive in his childhood, and then at 17 turns around and says to his parents, I'm going to give this a go. And 2 years later, 3 years later, is on a mini tour that's significant opportunities with the world tours. Like, where would you guide kids today when it comes to sport?
I honestly think if you look at today as a whole, obviously I'm a parent, so I look at it now and I really do have an interest in it because I look at kids today and how one-directional they are. If a kid is invested in an iPad or he's got a game, he's into that game. He's only in that game. He loves that game. He plays that game every day. He plays one game and he does one thing and he does it. When I grew up, there was never that. Like every day, it was about doing something different. It was about, okay, today I'm going to go and build a fort in the woods, or today I'm going to go and play cricket with my brother, or today I'm going to go catch a fish, or today I'm going to go and build a boat with my, I grew up on a farm, so I was lucky in that way. But I want that for my kids. I want my kids to be multi-directional because I think it benefits you later in life. If I was groomed in that way just to be golf, I would only know golf. If we had this situation and I never played a team sport and I don't think I'd be a decent interview, because my people skills would be really low. My EQ would be low. I think if I was a concert pianist and I was only good at concert pianist, then my parents were like at 7 years old, take me out of school, and I never learned how to speak to friends, and I was never in any of those situations. What happens when I'm 23 and I've got to travel to go and play in London, for instance, from America, to go and play in front of 1,000 people, and now I've got to deal with different people I've never met before, and I've got to deal with all these things. Well, I've got to fly my parents with me, because they're the people who've been doing it for me my whole life. And I think that's a major issue, and I see that issue in golf. If you think about this junior worlds at under 11, there's so many good kids around the world. Golf is, since Tiger and because of Tiger, and then now Rory and Scotty and Rahm and Sergio and all these guys, there's so many young guys interested in golf. So many young people, and not just boys, girls as well. You can't have the parents, I think, just doing everything for the kids and directing them in one way. The best thing I heard the other day is my local golf union, so my county or my province, they don't allow caddies. They don't allow caddies until you're 17 or 16, I think. Only older than 16. So that means the parents can watch, but they're not allowed to walk on the fairway. They're not allowed to give any advice. The kids have got to learn to do it all by themselves. And we're now the #1 junior and amateur province. We're producing the most good kids, Aldrich Potgieter, Christo Lampra, these young kids that are coming out and winning, the amateurs, winning, going on the Corn Ferry Tour, doing well in college, we're producing consistent kids that are coming out of our area. Louis' foundation's done a great job at that, and this golf union. And I think it's because of that, because the kids learn to think on their own. They're out there on the fairway, and it's like, is it a 6 hybrid or a 7 iron, or what am I going to do? And they've got to make the decision themselves, and then they've also got to deal with that decision themselves, whatever happens. I think that bodes you well going into the professional game, because when you get into this arena, it's you. You're going to have the greatest caddy in the world, and he can help you all the way down. But if you're not going to stand up there and do it, it's not going to happen, is it? So I feel like, it's important for kids to be multi-directional and just kind of outside of the box, not so reliant on the parents. And I think the parents need to just take a little step back.
Yeah. So thinking about that just for a moment, how do you structure your team now? Obviously, Ali Mella, you got your manager stroke caddy on the bag occasionally. Like, who else is around you, and how else does that work? If it is, as you say, you had this family dynamic, which is super competitive. Then you grow up, you start to look after yourself a lot more. You're now out on the tour. It's an individual sport, although now you're operating within Stinger GC. So it's a team sport now in your lifestyle. But how does your actual team look, physios, coaches, and how do you operate with that during a tournament week?
Yeah, so it's quite a funny story. I've kind of picked everyone up along the way. So Ali was first 12 years ago now. He came down to South Africa, saw me at the tournament. We kind of had a chat. I signed with him, and we started, and then that kind of got my journey to Europe going through Challenge Tour invites and European Tour invites, and playing well on the Sunshine Tour and stuff. And then I switched coaches to Grant Veenstra, who's my swing coach. So I got Ali, my manager, Grant, my swing coach, and Jason Reynolds, or Pup, his nickname's Pup, who's my caddy. They've been with me 6 years. And then Andy Paisley, putting coach, Chris Paisley's brother, he's been with me 6 years. And then I've got Garth Milne, who's been my trainer for 10 years. And then I've got a psychologist, Andy Duncan, who's a musician, procession drummer, so really used to kind of performing on the spot kind of stuff. So it's great to bounce a lot of stuff off him. And then obviously a physio. So I've now got 7 members in my team. But not everybody travels the same week. Not everybody's at every tournament. And I kind of like it that way, because I still have that reliance of doing stuff for myself. Obviously my physio is with me every week, and Ali's with me pretty much every week, almost every week. So, and obviously my caddy. So those 3, but the others all kind of bounce around. They give me enough freedom to kind of, if my swing's feeling great, I don't want my coach standing there and telling me, takeaway looks a little bit inside. I mean, if I'm hitting every ball down the middle of the fairway and onto the green, I mean, if it's a little inside, I really don't care. I mean, as long as it's going in the right way, I can win a tournament with that. Or if my putting coach is there and he's like, oh, your tempo just looks a little slow, but my speed's great on greens that are running 15, then it is what it is. I don't mind. But on the other side of that, it's also good to have them there just to, check, even if they're not saying anything, just to be there and give me reassurance, take videos when it is going really well so we can look back when it isn't going well. Oh, this is what you're doing when you were playing well, kind of thing. And it's good to kind of have that balance.
One thing that actually intrigues me quite a lot is how players typically, and obviously this is a question directed specifically at you, but how you go about your course strategy week to week. And I'm thinking about that not just between you and your caddy, but how the rest of your team get involved. Like, does your coach get involved in that and think about, look, statistically, you've got these strengths and these weaknesses, so let's go through the golf course and figure out which shots to play where. Like, how deep do you go with your team outside your caddy when it comes to the strategic approach of the game?
Yeah, so it kind of started while I was still on the European tour with Eduardo Molinari. So he came out after one of his injuries. He came out with his app and his stats thing, and he came back, and that gave me my first real deep dive into stats and looking at what I do. For instance, if there's a back left flag, I always used to miss it long left for some reason, and it's because I used to try and turn everything into that pin. And my miss was long left if I was hitting a draw. So, I dive into that, and I still use a lot of that info today. Even though I don't use Eduardo's stuff anymore, I've still got old stuff on Valderrama. I've still got old stuff on a lot of courses that I have played. And I do dive, we keep stats on every single round. My caddy's walking out every distance of every putt. We're shooting every distance, whether we're missing left, right, where the wind was left to right or right to left, and where I missed there, what pin it was. So we do dive into it, and then between the team, they talk about it, and then they come to me with kind of pointers. So before a week, my swing coach might phone me and say, "Listen, on Valderrama, you've been hitting your 3-wood great. Don't maybe keep the 3-wood in this week and just have the 2-iron there as a backup, because you're not going to hit that many drivers if the wind's not blowing, or whatever the case may be." And we'll go on stats like that, and then he'll say, "Look, hit yourself into this zone because right now between 100 and 150, you're leading the tour. You keep hitting yourself into that zone, and you're going to give yourself a lot of chances," or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I do dive pretty deep into it.
But all of that is playing the game, right? And at the end of the day, how has that helped you develop as a player for playing the game versus going out on the range and just beating balls? How did you get this process that you're able to manage yourself to the point where it's the game? I get it. You want to beat the Garcias. Yeah. You want to play on the LIV. You want to develop. You want to play in majors. But constantly you're mastering the game, whereas I see a lot of people today trying to please the camera, or perhaps even worse, please AI tuition now versus, sports box, whatever it is that puts the markers on you. How have you stayed true to the game and keeping the playful child in you that competed against your brother, that took guidance from your mother and drive from your father? How did you keep that forefront?
I think that's like you said, you were a little old school. I think I'm old school that way. I didn't even know AI had a thing that you could put dots on. I mean, not that I don't think I would ever use it. My coach might use it, but I don't think I would use it. But the game is still going to be the game. So you can stand on a perfectly flat line, beat balls down the 100 and hit the 300 board 8 out of 10 times with your driver. But when you get over on a left to right wind with a left to right fairway, water down the right, and you've got to hold it into the wind, otherwise it's going to bounce right into the water. Suddenly that shot becomes irrelevant. So you need to be able to hit the shots. And in saying that, there's a different added element of, self-pressure, pressure from outside, from the crowd if they're watching you, or whatever you would feel from them, or pressure from your playing partner. If you get into a situation where you're coming down trying to win a tournament, the balls you've beaten, yes, they're going to counter that. And there is an element to the secret in the dirt to hone strike and to hone everything basically from that perspective. But that's not what you do on the golf course. Golf is totally different to that dynamic. So standing there and taking 100 videos of your swing is great. And I do it. I do look at my swing and I do video my swing. But when I get on the golf course, that's the last thing I want to be thinking of. The thing I want to be thinking of is how am I going to make this ball go 20 yards left or right? Because that's the shot I need right now. So how am I going to do that? How am I going to achieve that?
How do you, just thinking about that, and obviously thinking about some of the stats we were just talking about a minute ago, with LIV Golf and playing in a team environment, how do you guys connect as a team? Do you guys even talk about statistics and how you're going to approach the golf course to give yourselves the best chance of winning that particular week? Like, how do you approach it differently than you would any other individual golf tournament, I suppose?
I think it's reasonably fresh right now. The team golfing, certainly in Live, we lucky the four of us are really close, and we generally play every practice round together. So from that perspective, we kind of all see what the other ones are doing, and if someone looks uncomfortable or is unsure on what to hit or what to do on that, generally we would talk about it between us. But we've grown up playing individual golf for so long as well. You're kind of reliant on your own game. So, all four of us are very different personalities and very different players. Louis, probably the most naturally gifted golfer I've ever seen in my life. Charles, really quite a close second or third behind him, and an unbelievable iron player, probably the best long and mid iron player I've ever seen. And then you got Brandon, who's got just this tenacity of, fight and wanting to kind of, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. I just want to get it in the hole. And then I kind of sit in the, somewhere in the middle between all three of them. So, and we all have this dynamic, and we talk about things and we bounce stuff off each other, and we talk about, that's a nice thing about team golf, is it keeps the kids element inside, because we get off around and you're lying on the physio bed, we'll be talking about, geez, how's that pin on 11 today? Did you see the pin? And with that wind, what kind of shot did you hit in there? And then we would describe, and he's like, oh, that makes sense, kind of the shot you hit in there, because I see that. That's kind of where you wanted to leave the ball, and oh, man, I screwed that up. I hit it over there and try to hit this shot, and we'll talk about it, and it would bring a bit of laughs, or someone shanks one or duffs one or does these, that team environment of being able to have that bit of banter between you and then pick each other up in that way if it's been a tough day is important, and it's great. It's something that when you play on the PGA Tour you certainly don't have. Even between us we wouldn't have had it on the PGA Tour, so it's a cool dynamic to have, certainly for me anyway, because I grew up playing a lot of team sport.
Yeah, and thinking about LIV Golf and how it's definitely changed the landscape of golf, it's pretty evident from the information, the stats that I've seen, that there's a younger crowd following LIV Golf, which is obviously great, right? You go to the events and the experiential side of things is amazing. You got the concerts and all the fan experiences on site, and the music on the tees, etc. And obviously, I love the fact, and I know not many people agree with my next point, but I really like the idea of a shotgun start, because it kind of feels a little bit like a football match. There's a bit of a build up before everything kicks off. How long it's roughly going to take. And it just feels like a great experience on site. But really, it's the viewing numbers I'm interested in. And, there's obviously been a lot of talk about in some countries how LIV Golf isn't really televised. Not many people are really watching it. But back home in South Africa, it's pretty big from my understanding. And obviously things that Supersport are being able to showcase on the television, it sounds like the South Africans have really, really taken to it and taken it to a whole new level in the country. Would you have any insights about how the South African market is really setting a tone that maybe other countries can learn from?
Look, we definitely have, as a country, we kind of always back team sport and always back the team. And this logo, kind of the coloring of the logo, the S for South Africa or Stinger, it was all thought through from that perspective, I think. And to kind of have all of this stuff put into the melting pot and then have the people kind of back it the way we were hoping for is special. There is a big backing. When I walk into an airport now, there's always a kid or there's always someone who would walk to me and say, hey, Dean, do you mind signing this or take a photo? Or I would never have had that anywhere else. Even if I'm not wearing any Stinger gear or anything, people are starting to notice who I am and where I am. So it's grown my brand. But from a team's perspective and from a LIV perspective, they're on board. And I think it's, especially with the kids, our merch and stuff back in South Africa, the kids stuff, the hats, the T-shirts, those kinds of things are always sold out. They're never in stock. We can't get them home fast enough. And then you talk about what we're doing from a tournament perspective. If you look at that, I saw numbers of demographics that we have. We've got more women coming to events, obviously because we have concerts and we have more. But that's part of growing the game. Our crowd is substantially younger than most other crowds, and I think that's where this fight between whatever traditionalists and LIV Golf kind of needs to stop, because they're two totally different products. They're not the same thing. Our market is a younger market. Our market is a a totally different demographic to a PGA Tour. And we're not knocking the PGA Tour by any means. We still love playing a lot of those events, and we would love to play, majors and big events all over the world. But we would also love people to experience what we're doing, because our thing is fun. It is great fun. Live Golf it's fun to be at a tournament. It's fun to go to the concert after. It's fun to have a few beers with your mates if you're in your 20s or 30s and you can deal with a hangover the next day. It's fun to do a whole bunch of those things. So for us, and from a South African perspective, what SuperSport have done in marketing it in South Africa for the four of us and our team and our brand has been special. I think the Rippers have done a similar thing in Australia. If you look what that event is, the reason for that is because of the marketing strategy of kind of people involved in Australia, and that's what SuperSport have done for us, and we're hoping to get it bigger and better. If we can get an event there as soon as possible, then we can grow this thing, and it'll be a big bang, and we're going to make this thing, hopefully move on into other countries and be big. The UK is another a big marketplace for Live Golf, and I don't know. I feel like Dallas a couple of weeks ago was special for us. There were, we had 15,000 people there on a Saturday, and it was, 100 degrees out there. It was good to see so many people out there supporting Bryson and all of us, and going to the concert. I didn't know who the guys were, but they were obviously really good. So it was from the demographic and the young people. It's special, and it's good to see. And I think that's how we're going to grow this thing, and that's how we're going to take golf to a new audience.
Yeah.
How did you become such a good advocate for the game? Like, the way you've spoken about Liv there has been fantastic. The way you've represented South Africa in this whole interview has been fantastic. Obviously, like I mentioned, our paths kind of loosely crossed, but I was on a different tour to you at the time, etc., etc. Do you think it's just experience? Has there been any media training from Liv? Like, you speak amazing about this whole thing. So how did that, and it's credit to yourself and to your team, but how do you think that came about?
Charlie, honestly, it's probably experience. I think it's a lot of interviews, a lot of TV. My dad knew a lot of commentators in the cricket area, so I spent quite a lot of time with them growing up. And my dad's also really well spoken, and he's a guy's guy. He's a bit of a people's person. So I think I've picked it up from him, and my mom. They're both really outgoing, speak to anybody, speak about anything, and kind of diplomatic about everything as well. So I suppose I get a lot of it from them, and then with experience in interviews and in things, I'm comfortable saying what I want to say, because my opinion is what it is, and this is genuinely how I feel about it. So yeah.
I knew you were a stand-up guy, but I mean, it's quality. I have one follow-up question from earlier, and then we're going to ask you, obviously, the dope stroke old adage question, which I'll let Daryl go for. He knows the one about the celebration and the location. You got it, Daryl. But the question I want to ask you, and it goes back to junior golf and kids and development, and I've learned a lot myself just listening to you, out-and-out player. Do you think the future of the game still has and will always have a place for the artist, the musician? Like, you are a master of your craft, but the game remains the pinnacle. You play the game. And you and I have touched on old school, which seems crazy because I'm a little bit older than you and we're very much still pretty young. But it's like, you're like, if I've got to hit the left to right peeler or the right to left draw into the left to right breeze to miss the water on the right, I'm doing it. Do you think there comes a point where these kids coming out of these colleges or these kids coming through today, they lose that artistry and they think about those shots? Well, my path has to be this, my face to path has to be that, my peak height has to be that. Or will the athlete always win over the future of golf?
I think consistently there's obviously a level of talent that needs to be met, right? And I think that artist is in there. So if you have that level of talent, if I look right here in front of me, I mean, guys that I play with right now, you got the Matt Wolf. I mean, he's miles away from any path or any face or any thing around there that you've ever seen in your life. I mean, but you watch him hit a golf ball and you think, damn, that's impressive. It comes out at 15 degrees at 185 plus ball speed every time, and it's a frozen rope. No draw, no fade, nothing. But if he needs to move it, he can move it. I mean, by doing all of that, he can move it. And it's impressive to see. Then you've got a guy like Bubba, who's probably one of the biggest movers and shapers of a golf ball And I'll never forget the first time I ever played with him. We were like 6 holes in. And I thought, geez, this is impressive. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The first time I ever played with him. And then we're on this par 5, and in the middle of the fairway, he's like 300 yards out, and there's a tree. He's got to go over this massive tree, and he pulls out driver. And I'm thinking, is he going to hook a driver around this tree? Left-handed. Hits this high cut with an 8-degree driver straight over this tree, and I'm thinking, I've never seen a golf shot. I literally was walking up to the green, and I said to him, I think that's probably the greatest shot I've ever seen. And he said, what are you talking about? I do that like every day. And I'm like, because you don't see it anymore. And kids need to know that that's going to be needed if they want to be on any tour and be really successful. I watched Scotty Scheffler in the worst weather ever, that Saturday at Troon that afternoon. I mean, I've played many a Dunhill links, but I've never seen anything like that. Never. Like, it was on that golf course to deal with that weather on the back 9. He missed 3 greens the whole day. Nobody talks about that stat. And do you know why he missed 3 greens? Because he couldn't reach. He couldn't reach them because they were too long. 13, 15, what was it? And I think 11 or something. All 3 of them were like 2 yards short on the front edge. That's it. Otherwise, he would have hit all 18 greens in that weather. So one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. But he never stood there and hit one shot all the time. He had a stock shot off the tee, but into every green, he was hitting it low. He was drawing it. He was fading it. He was moving it. And it was cool to see. Like a guy, like you say, a master of his craft. He's an artist. He's a true golfer. There's no point. I grew up with guys who used to hit way more balls than me. Used to practice way harder than me. Crates and crates. I mean, we had these, where I grew up, we had these beer crates. I know it's very South African, but we had beer crates filled. Each one had 500 golf balls in them, and they were specifically to top amateurs and pros and stuff. And I used to hit one of those every single day. Every day I hit 500 balls. One. And there was this guy, I won't mention his name, but he used to hit 2 of those every day. So he literally hit double the amount of balls I hit. And he didn't make it onto any golf tour ever. Ever. In his life. But he had a really good golf swing, and he could stand on the range, and he could flush it. And he could. And every now and again, he'd play a really good round of golf, but he couldn't golf the ball. He couldn't. If he hit it under a tree, he'd have to chip it out. He couldn't stand there and hit a 30-yard slice with a 3-iron, onto the green and knock it in for birdie, keep his round going. He'd have to chip it out, hit it on the green, make bogey, lose your momentum, and then it turns into a 72. So it's important to just get out there and play, enjoy it. We've got so many good golf courses all over the world. If I have any advice for any junior, is get your bag on a trolley, carry a small bag, get out there and play. My dad tells us a famous story to everyone, which I can't remember. But the first 9 holes I ever played, I was 5 years old. And it was a Saturday, and I was supposed to play with my parents. And it started raining really hard in the afternoon. And my parents were like, no, they're not going out. All their mates were sitting in the pub. So they ended up having beers with them. And they said they looked out the window, and I'd grabbed my dad's caddy. His name was Lovemore, my dad's local caddy. And I'd forced him to put the bag over his shoulder, and there him and I just walked out. And we got in, and they saw me coming up and over the hill on the 9th hole, and I was finishing my 9 holes. And I walked into the clubhouse, no umbrella, soaking wet. And my parents were like, are you crazy? You're going to get sick and everything. And Lovemore, the caddy, turns to my dad and he says, "Yo, boss, you won't believe what happened." And he tells the story. We get to the 6th hole, which is the stroke 1, and I hit driver in the fairway. Then I laid up short of the pond, and I couldn't get over the pond. And I had 8 balls in my golf bag. I hit all 8 in the pond. And then I made the caddy strip down and go and fetch more golf balls and bring them back to me until I got over the pond. So,
What a legend.
Get out there and do that kind of thing. I mean, get out there and play. Enjoy it. Love it.
Wow. Well,
love it.
that definitely brings this episode to an amazing conclusion. But we do have that's an amazing story. We do have a bit of a tradition that we do on this podcast show, by the way, Burmy. So basically, it's all to do with a moment in your golfing life that you've really enjoyed. Could be a win, could be something you did personally, whatever it might be. And we're really trying to understand the circumstances that led to you enjoying a particular beer or beverage of your choice, wherever it might be, that you think of fondly based on that golfing experience. Can you sort of name the time, location, and what beer it was that you did or beverage that you did have when you enjoyed that moment?
Okay, so 2015 Swanee Open. I just won the co-sanction event that's going to get me on the European tour. Really emotional. Obviously, the champagne comes. I've got a bunch of mates there. I've got Ali there. I've got my parents there, my wife, my newborn son. And it's emotional. It's amazing. Drenched in champagne, but I didn't have a sip of champagne. I didn't have a sip. I signed my scorecard. And before I walked out to go and get the trophy, we have a beer in South Africa that's a black label. It's called Black Label. And a Carling Black Label. And its nickname is Zamalek. And I'll never forget my dad. That's all he drank. And I never drank this beer. And my dad walked there and he handed me one just like a poof. And it literally was the fastest 4 sips you've ever seen before I went and accepted the trophy. And said thanks to everybody for having me at the event. But that was the coldest and the coolest beer I can remember having.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
That is truly amazing. Yeah. Listen, what a story. It's been super insightful listening to everything that you've had to say today, Burmy. Much appreciated. Big shout out to friend of the brand, Ali Meller, as well from Hype Sports Management. Thanks for helping coordinate this up. And yeah, listen, super grateful. And on behalf of all of us at Dope Stroke and all of our listeners, thanks so much for joining us today, Burmy. It's been a great
Pleasure,
session.
boys.
Really
That was
enjoyed it.
fun. Cheers,
Top
guys.
man, Bernie.